Alright, so today we're talking about a story that somehow manages to be messy, chaotic, and confusing all at the same time, which is honestly impressive. It's like if drama, poor decision making, and internet fame all got blended together in a Walmart smoothie blender set to maximum destruction. The person at the center of all this is Alex Daisy, also known online as Wheelchair Rapunzel. Now, if you've been anywhere near TikTok in the past few years, you might have seen her content floating around. And if you haven't, don't worry. I'm about to walk you through the cinematic universe of chaos that led to this whole situation. Because this story doesn't start with police reports and internet outrage. It actually starts in the most normal way possible: social media. Back around 2020, Alex started posting about her life online. Her content mainly revolved around living with spinal muscular atrophy, a genetic condition that affects muscle strength. And honestly, early on, people really liked her content. She was open about her experiences. She talked about disability awareness. She shared parts of her daily life. It was the kind of content that made people feel like they were getting a real look at someone navigating challenges most of us never think about. And the internet ate it up. Her following grew pretty quickly across Instagram and TikTok. Supportive comments, viral clips, the whole thing. Everything seemed to be going great. But then, the vibe started changing. Slowly. Very slowly. Like when you realize the movie you're watching has suddenly turned into a horror film, but nobody told you yet. At some point, the content started shifting away from advocacy and more into what I can only describe as aggressively chaotic confidence. Now listen, I'm all for confidence. Confidence is great, but there's a difference between confidence and acting like you just unlocked a secret cheat code for main character syndrome. For example, one of her early viral clips involved her skipping a line at a club. And when I say skipping the line, I don't mean politely asking people to move. No, I mean literally just rolling straight through the crowd like a Roomba that gained sentience and chose violence. Just full speed ahead. No warning, no excuse me. Just bonk, bonk, bonk into random people standing there. And the guy she bumps into looks exactly how you'd expect someone to look when they get blindsided by a human bumper car. Confused, slightly concerned, probably questioning if he accidentally walked into a deleted scene from Fast and Furious parking lot drift.
Disable Bad Bee and get into clubs first.
Now to be fair, that clip alone wasn't enough to turn people against her. If anything, it just added to her internet persona. But it did introduce something that would keep popping up again and again throughout this entire story. A growing sense that the rules didn't really apply. And once that mindset starts creeping into someone's online career, things usually start going downhill, fast. And in this case, they really did. Because not long after that, Alex would find herself in her first real internet controversy. And it all started in a bathroom. Yeah, that sentence alone should already tell you where this is going. But trust me, it somehow gets way weirder than that. Not the fun kind like when your friend jumps out and scares you while brushing your teeth. This one was significantly more awkward. So one night, Alex is out at some kind of restaurant or club. Standard night out. Music, drinks, people trying to enjoy themselves, the usual. But when she goes to use the restroom, she notices something that apparently sends her into full investigative journalist mode. Someone else is using the accessible stall. Now normally, in a public restroom situation, the universal rule is pretty simple. If a stall is open, you use it. Nobody's pulling out blueprints and conducting an architectural investigation into stall assignments. But instead of waiting her turn or just moving on, Alex decides to do something that can only be described as bathroom stakeout behavior. She waits outside the stall with a camera, like she's about to expose a secret government conspiracy happening behind door number 3. Eventually, the woman comes out, and Alex immediately starts confronting her while recording. She basically lectures the woman about how accessible stalls exist for disabled people and not for luxury space. Which, okay, the sentiment itself isn't completely crazy. Accessible spaces are important, but the method here was questionable, because filming someone inside or right outside a bathroom situation is basically social interaction on nightmare difficulty. And the internet noticed pretty quickly. The clip spread around and suddenly people weren't talking about disability advocacy anymore. They were talking about whether ambushing strangers with a camera in a bathroom hallway might actually be worse than someone using a bigger stall. And surprisingly, most people agreed on something for once. Yeah, maybe don't do that. This was the moment where the internet started doing that thing it does best. zooming in, analyzing everything, looking for patterns. Because once someone gets labeled controversial, every single post starts getting examined like it's the Zapruder film. And Alex wasn't exactly helping herself. Around this time, her content was entering what I can only describe as her party era. More nightlife content, more drinking, more posts that felt less like advocacy and more like someone speedrunning the influencer lifestyle, which included a lot of thirst trap style videos and extremely bold captions. Stuff like joking about stealing people's boyfriends or saying things that made viewers do the internet equivalent of a slow blink. Again, confidence isn't the problem. But when your brand originally starts with wholesome awareness content, suddenly pivoting into chaotic nightlife influencer energy is going to confuse people. It's like if a nature documentary suddenly cut to the narrator doing tequila shots with raccoons behind a dumpster. Technically possible, but definitely unexpected. And while the bathroom controversy slowly faded away, another situation was brewing that would push things even further into drama territory. Because soon after that, Alex made a decision that ended up dividing her own audience almost instantly. A decision involving a certain adult content platform. And when that announcement dropped, the internet reacted exactly how you'd expect. Half the audience went, "Okay, do your thing." The other half went, "Wait, hold on a second." And that's when things really started spiraling. But none of that chaos compares to what happened next. Because the next chapter introduces someone who would become one of the most important and messy parts of this entire story. Her boyfriend, Noah Smith. And the way they met already sounds like the opening scene of a reality show that producers secretly know is going to end in disaster. So Noah had just gotten out of rehab. Fresh start, trying to rebuild life, that kind of situation. And like many people navigating modern romance, he jumps on dating apps. You know, the digital jungle where you either find love or accidentally match with someone who owns 17 ferrets and communicates exclusively through astrology charts. Eventually, he matches with Alex. But here's the interesting detail. According to Noah himself, when he first saw her profile, he didn't even realize she was disabled because the photo was cropped in a way where the wheelchair wasn't visible, which already sets the stage for a very awkward, "oh, okay" moment when he scrolls through the rest of the profile. But instead of immediately backing out, he talks to friends about it, and his friends basically say, "Hey man, give it a shot." So he does. They start talking, messages turn into conversations, and eventually, he decides to go meet her in person.
I was fresh out of rehab, and I was on the dating apps, Bumble, Tinder, all that, and I happened to match with Alex on Bumble. And honestly, it's kind of crazy because like her photo, it was like cropped to where you couldn't see. And I have nothing against disabled people, but like it had been something I hadn't been with in the past and something I didn't know if I was necessarily comfortable being with. So like when I first clicked on her thing and matched with her, I didn't even know she was disabled. And then later I went through her photos, I found out. I talked to some buddies and they said, give it a shot, give her a shot. And so we talked for a few days and then I ended up going over to her house. We hung out. The first red flag though was I was in recovery and she was drinking alcohol right in front of me.
Now, if this was a normal romantic story, this is where I'd cue soft background music and talk about how two people connected against all odds. But unfortunately, this story has the romantic stability of a shopping cart with one missing wheel. Because almost immediately, there are red flags popping up like it's a carnival game. Remember, Noah had just gotten out of rehab, meaning he was actively trying to stay sober. Meanwhile, Alex enjoys alcohol. A lot. Like the kind of, this might be a personality trait level of drinking. So one of the first things Noah notices is that she's drinking around him pretty casually, which, if you're someone fresh out of rehab, is about as helpful as trying to diet while living inside a Krispy Kreme. Not ideal. But despite that, the relationship moves forward. Pretty quickly, actually. And when I say quickly, I mean the timeline of this relationship starts moving like someone hit fast forward on the remote. Because only a few months into dating, Alex becomes pregnant, which is a pretty huge development for any couple, but especially one that hasn't exactly established the most stable foundation. Suddenly their relationship isn't just messy internet drama anymore. Now there's a baby involved, and that's when things start getting a lot more serious, because Alex begins posting a massive amount of content about the pregnancy. And I mean a lot. Pregnancy updates, doctor visits, daily life videos. The algorithm absolutely loved it. The views skyrocketed. But behind the scenes, things between Alex and Noah were apparently becoming more and more unstable, and the internet was starting to notice. Because while the content looked wholesome on the surface, little details kept slipping through that suggested the situation might not be nearly as stable as it appeared. And unfortunately, those suspicions would soon turn into something much bigger. Because after the baby was born, the real problems started showing up. And not just online, but in real life, including visits from people you definitely don't want showing up at your door when you're raising a child, authorities. And once that started happening, the entire story took a very dark turn. First off, the relationship between Alex Daisy and Noah Smith was already rocky. Noah had been in and out of rehab, Alex was still posting nightlife content and drinking fairly often, and trying to balance those two lifestyles together was about as stable as building a house out of Jenga blocks during an earthquake. But things got even more complicated when their daughter, Ari, was born, because suddenly there was a new question floating around online. Who exactly was taking care of the baby? Now, normally that wouldn't even be a conversation, but in this situation, people had concerns. Alex requires a caregiver for many daily tasks due to spinal muscular atrophy, meaning she relies on assistance for certain physical activities. Meanwhile, Noah, the other adult in the household, was still dealing with recovery and occasional rehab stays. So the internet began asking questions, and eventually those questions reached people outside the internet, which led to visits from Child Protective Services. And just hearing those three letters, CPS, is usually enough to make any parent extremely nervous.
The police were just here, and apparently someone online is trying to get me arrested or something for indecent exposure, because I posted a photo yesterday of me and Ari on the driveway, and I was wearing a towel on my chair. You couldn't even see anything. You could see more at the beach.
Now, to be clear, CPS visits don't automatically mean someone did something wrong. Sometimes they happen because someone reported concerns. Sometimes they're precautionary. But the fact that it was happening at all meant the situation had reached a level where authorities felt they needed to check in. And unfortunately, the online drama didn't stop there, because during this same period, Alex started posting videos that raised even more eyebrows. One of the more infamous moments involved her explaining why she had a black eye. Now, normally when someone starts a video with, "Okay, so I have a black eye, but let me explain," you immediately know the story is going to involve at least one questionable decision. And in this case, it absolutely did. According to her explanation, she had been out drinking earlier in the day while her daughter was staying with family. At some point, she tried heading home, didn't notice a curb, and ended up face planting, which is unfortunate, but also the kind of story that makes you wonder how many margaritas were involved in the timeline.
Am I disabled? Yes. Do I have a black eye? Yes. Before we get into the black eye, alright, let's just get into the black eye. So I was out downtown Chicago, just having some drinks, having some lunch. Ari was away with her grandparents for the weekend, so I'm like, alright, I'm gonna have a little mama's day. So during my pregnancy, my seatbelt broke, and I never fixed it, which was not a smart move. So I was leaving the restaurant, and I'm like, I'm gonna go home, I'm tipsy and feeling good, I'm having myself a good day. And apparently, I did not see a curb. And I basically face planted, and I severely hurt my shoulder. I have a black eye, and I also have some road rash.
Clips like that started adding to the internet's growing concern, because at this point, the narrative surrounding her online persona was beginning to change. What used to look like a confident influencer documenting her life was starting to look more like someone constantly surrounded by chaos, arguments, breakups, reconciliations, more drinking, more online drama, and eventually, even more serious allegations. Because the situation between Alex and Noah was about to reach a breaking point. And once that happened, the story didn't just stay on social media anymore. It spilled into police reports, accusations, and one incident that would completely change how the internet viewed Wheelchair Rapunzel. And once that part of the story came out, there was no going back. Now remember, because of spinal muscular atrophy, Alex Daisy requires assistance with certain daily tasks. Normally that means hiring trained caregivers through agencies or medical services. Pretty standard process. Professional caregivers, background checks, training, the usual responsible stuff. But instead of consistently going through professional channels, Alex had a habit of finding caregivers online. And when I say online, I mean places like Craigslist, which, for those unfamiliar, is basically the internet's version of digging through a mystery box labeled "could be fine, could be a disaster." Sometimes you find a couch. Sometimes you find a guy trying to trade 3 turtles for a PlayStation. So relying on Craigslist for caregiving help was already raising eyebrows. But one of these hires ended up becoming a major problem. Enter a caregiver named Hannah. Hannah was brought in to help with both Alex and the baby. And according to her, the job quickly turned into something far more chaotic than she expected. She later claimed that Alex refused certain hygiene practices that most professional caregivers consider standard. For example, using protective gloves, which is, kind of the bare minimum when you're doing hygiene care. But apparently, Alex didn't like caregivers wearing gloves because she said it felt unnatural. Now, I'm not a medical professional, but I'm pretty confident that bare-handed caregiving is not exactly industry standard. In fact, most professionals would hear that and immediately start speed walking toward the exit. But the drama between Hannah and Alex didn't end there, because eventually their working relationship collapsed completely. After leaving the job, Hannah went online and started sharing her experience publicly, posting claims, giving interviews, basically unloading everything she had seen while working there.
Doesn't want her caregivers wearing PPE because it doesn't feel natural, or she feels offended by it. Is that true? Did you wear gloves when you did her things?
Oh gosh, no. I was like, why do you think I washed my hands like 10 times after I left? I was like,
so you weren't allowed to wear gloves?
No, I was scrubbing the crap out of my hands after I got off shift. I'm like, literally, I wouldn't even drive home. I literally was scrubbing crap out of my hands. Like,
so this is true. So did she say to you, no wearing PPE gloves?
Literally, she says, I like for it to be all natural. She's like,
there's no natural. There's no natural to that.
She doesn't like anybody wearing gloves. She likes everything to be natural, aired out, gloves wise. Like, literally, I was like, ugh.
No.
I'm not a caregiver.
A caregiver would never, like a licensed caregiver would never be like, yeah, no problem. I'll use my bare hands.
And that's when things really started exploding online. Because some of the accusations weren't just about hygiene issues or drinking. They were about something far more serious. And when those allegations started spreading across forums and commentary channels, the internet went into full investigation mode. Suddenly, every old clip, every past controversy, every questionable moment from Alex's content was getting re-examined, like detectives reviewing evidence in a true crime documentary. But even with all the chaos already surrounding her reputation, nothing could have prepared people for the story that came next, because one incident involving a teenager in her apartment building would eventually lead to police involvement. And once the details of that situation became public, the entire internet's perception of Wheelchair Rapunzel changed almost overnight. According to reports, Alex Daisy had returned home after being out drinking, and at some point during that night, she encountered a teenager in the building, a kid, around 13 years old. Now, normally, elevator small talk is harmless. You press a button, maybe exchange an awkward nod, then both silently stare at the numbers like it's the most fascinating thing on earth. But this interaction didn't end when the elevator doors opened. Instead, Alex reportedly asked the teenager if he could help her get into her apartment, which, on the surface, might not sound that strange. Someone asking for help getting through a door or carrying something happens all the time. But once inside the apartment, the situation took a turn that would eventually lead to police involvement. According to the report, Alex asked the teenager to help her take a bath. Yeah, let that one sink in for a second. Now, the teenager apparently hesitated but still tried to help, believing he was just assisting someone who needed care. And according to the statements that later surfaced, he helped her undress, get into the bathtub, and waited until she finished before helping her out again. During that time, there was also a strange moment where she asked him to get her a beer, which becomes even more awkward when you remember the kid is 13. So the whole situation is already extremely uncomfortable just hearing about it. Eventually, the teenager's mother noticed that he hadn't come home yet and started messaging him. When she found out where he was and what he was doing, she understandably rushed over to the apartment. and when the full story came out later, she reported the incident to authorities, which triggered a police investigation. Now, when officers spoke with Alex about the situation, she reportedly claimed that she didn't mean any harm and that she had simply asked for help because she didn't have a caregiver available that night. She also admitted she had been drinking, which, at this point in the story, had basically become the default explanation for half the chaos surrounding her. But the situation didn't just disappear. Authorities eventually filed charges connected to the incident, and once word of that started circulating online, the reaction was immediate. Any remaining goodwill that Alex had built during her early content days began evaporating almost overnight, because this wasn't just messy influencer drama anymore. This was a criminal allegation, and once the police reports started spreading across the internet, even some of her most loyal supporters began backing away. Her comment sections filled with people demanding answers, demanding explanations, and asking why she hadn't addressed the situation publicly yet. But instead of immediately responding to the accusations, something else happened that made the whole situation even more complicated. Because right around the same time this story began spreading, her already unstable relationship with Noah Smith finally exploded. And the fallout from that breakup would add even more chaos to an already unbelievable situation.